Hi, welcome LEC community. Today we are here highlighting and spotlighting our educators that were nominated for the Latinx Educator Awards. Today we have Miss Amanda Vega-Mavec. She's nominated for Administrator of the Year. So how are you, Amanda?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good, good. Hopefully you had a nice holiday. But yeah, we have some questions for you, for our community to get to know you. So yeah, tell us about yourself, your role, and your journey to it.
The journey started kind of where I'm at right now. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, with my family for the holiday. I live and work in the Kansas City area, but this is where I'm from, and from San Antonio, it's my family is my mom, my dad, my sister, and now also my sister's best friend, who's like a sister. So depending on the circumstances, I may talk about two sisters. Um, my dad, my both my parents are retired now, but my dad was a mechanic and my mom was a teacher and then a principal. And so I left San Antonio when I left for college, and I went to college. I went to Wellesley College, which is just outside of Boston, and did that. And in thinking about representation and everything that LEC does and wanting to support Latino students, I was thinking about it because I had the opportunity, especially being from a place like San Antonio, where just representation is different here than it might be in other communities. And I had the opportunities throughout high school to attend programming specific for Latino students. And one of those was the Lorenzo de Zavala Youth Legislative Session. It's a mouthful. And I met people from all over Texas, other high school students from all over Texas at that program. And when I was getting ready to decide on a college, I had the opportunity to go and visit Wellesley as a senior in high school. And my mom and myself, and then all four of my grandparents got into a Suburban and drove from San Antonio up to Wellesley to go and visit it. We didn't really know how this whole, college visit thing works. And so that's how we did it. And I remember getting to Wellesley and telling my mom, "Oh, mom, there's a girl there. I know her. She went with me to LDZ." And my mom was like, you don't know anybody here. Like, you've never been outside of Texas except for Louisiana and Mexico. Like, how could you possibly know anybody here? I was like, no, mom, I know her. I know her. And sure enough, I went up to her and she recognized me and we spent the whole day together. And so later that evening, I was supposed to spend the night at the dorm, again, as part of the visit process. And I didn't. I just remember thinking, I'm done. Like, this is great. Spending the day with Christina, and the school had given me the best financial aid package. And so we never even went to visit the other school that we were supposed to visit. And so I mentioned that because that experience in high school, that one summer, helped connect me or make me feel belonging, like a sense of belonging at the college that I ended up attending. So I went to Wellesley, graduated from there, had all through college, I had no intention of being an educator. All through college, I thought I would, well, at first I thought I'd go into politics. And then that changed and I thought I'd go into social work, nonprofit, type things. And I had a job lined up, and a few weeks before graduation got a call and they said the job is there, but we have no money to hire you. And I remember telling my mom, and my mom said, well, you agreed to live with some friends, like, you got to pay rent, you got to pay your bills, figure something out. And she was a principal at the time, and I remember her saying, Texas is in dire need of bilingual teachers. Just get a job as a teacher for a year until you figure it out. And she said, I remember her saying something like, you have a heartbeat and you speak Spanish, you're going to get hired. I just know you're going to get hired. And sure enough, within a few days of applying, I got hired as a fifth grade bilingual teacher at a school in Austin, Texas. And so I spent a year there, and I called my mom like every day. What do I do? What do I do tomorrow? What do I do when a child says this to me? What do I do when this happens? What do I do now? And she was the one who would tell me, you have people at your school, you need to be asking them. And again, being in a place like Austin compared to other places, I had a Latina principal who was very supportive, very encouraging, and just really helped me once I connected with her and once I kind of got my feet on the ground. And so between her and a couple of other teachers, especially another Latina teacher, I just figured it out little by little. And so I remember calling my mom towards the end of the school year and said, you got yourself a teacher. I'm sold. I'm going to do this, but I don't want to be in Texas. I was like, I'm going to go back to Boston. And so I did. I went back to Boston and I worked in a place. It's a city. It's Chelsea, Massachusetts. It's considered an inner city suburb of Boston. And at the time, the city of Chelsea itself is only about 2 square miles of area. And at that time, so this was a number of years ago, we had 5,000 students in the school system. And so that didn't include the adults at home, that didn't include the babies at home. It's one of the most densely populated areas of the United States. It is also a refugee resettlement site. And so, and it's a community that's always been known as an immigrant community. And over the years, the waves of immigrants and where they're coming from and their stories had changed. And so when I was there, I started as a bilingual teacher, and then Massachusetts did away with bilingual education. And so I became what they called an English immersion teacher. And so I had up to like 30 first and second graders in my classroom who were literally from all over the world. And I had, I don't know how many languages, how many cultures, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved so, and I wish now I could go back and do it again, knowing what I know now, especially about things like trauma-informed care. A good number of my students were refugees and were coming from refugee camps. We're coming from very traumatic situations, and we did it, and we did the work. But now I have the vocabulary, I have the terminology, I have the actual strategies, I have the research behind it. I know about how the brain works now, and I didn't at that time. Everything makes sense now, but I wish I could go back and do those 6 years again. So during that time, like I said, I fell in love with teaching, fell in love with education, fell in love with the language journey that the children were on, and decided to get my master's. And I was able to get it at Boston University, and I have a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages, a very long name. Yeah. And so did that for 6 years. And then just through a couple of things going on in my life, decided to move to the Kansas City area. And I was working at a charter school on the Missouri side when I first got here, and did that for about 3 years. I worked as a Spanish teacher and as a science teacher. And then decided that I wanted to work on a doctorate. And so knew that I just needed to change jobs if I was going to do that. And so I started working at the Catholic schools in Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas. And so I did that while I was working on my doctorate, and then got a job as a principal at one of the K-8 Catholic schools in Wyandotte County, and did that for a few years. Meanwhile, my daughter, and in that time I fell in love, got married, got pregnant, had a baby. And my daughter was at El Centro Academy for Children, which is where I work now. And I just, loved everything about El Centro. And so an opportunity there opened up at the time, as their director of curriculum and instruction. And it just felt right. It was just, it kind of brought together all of the worlds I'd always wanted to be a part of: education, social services, all of those things. And so I got the job, and my daughter moved on to kindergarten, and I stayed there as an employee. And so was the director of, and it's a Spanish English dual language program. And so I was the director of curriculum and instruction for probably about a year before I became director. And then shortly after I became director, COVID happened. Yeah. And so everything just kind of changed. And we closed for, during all of that time, we closed for a relatively short amount of time, and mostly stayed open. And so like most educators in most schools across the country, across the world, we just did what we could to support our families during that time. And so I've been there. This is my 4th school year there. And so that's kind of my journey. That's my professional journey.
Well, I was making notes because that's an incredible journey from not having education in your view to just becoming this. Because I know you're a mentor. I know, yeah, all the knowledge that you have, then you're passing it on to other people and what you have accumulated throughout the years. My mom was also a teacher, and she was part of why I became a teacher as well. Just like you. Yeah, in the Centro, it's amazing. You guys do a lot for the community, from little kids to older adults. Yeah, you guys support everyone in the community. So, yeah, kudos to you all.
Thank you.
Well, you were nominated for Administrator of the Year, and I want to read what your nominator said. Your nominator said, "She marries a loving heart with children in need, with academic and intellectual rigor to help them succeed." She also said that you are willing to chip in with kitchen duty, even though uh, that is not part of your job description. So, how does it feel to be nominated for Administrator of the Year or to hear these words from your nominator?
So one of the things, like when I think of myself as a school leader, my parents were a huge part of my approach to leadership. They were very much like, don't do anything, don't ask anybody to do anything you yourself are not willing to do.
Mhm.
And then I had some really great role models, the school leaders along the way, who the same thing, they just did anything and everything. And I'd see my mom do anything and everything at her school. And so when I became a school leader, that when she mentions the kitchen duty, there was a rough spot there for a little bit with their kitchen. Where I think I was in the kitchen for about a month at one point. But that's the only way I know how to do it. Is you're not above any job in the school building. You are janitor, you are teacher, you are anything and everything. And so I very much, that's very important to me, to be able to do anything that I'm going to ask our staff to do. I need to be willing to do myself. But in terms of how does it feel to be nominated, it feels great. Like there's a lot of emotions that come with it. There's also some humility that comes with it. It's to be nominated for an award from LEC is really exciting because of the work that you all are doing specifically in this space for Latinx educators, and being able to see the growth that you all as an organization are doing, and to in some way be a small part of that growth and to be recognized by your organization, and just everything that you all stand for is exciting, and I'm proud to have been nominated for an award within your organization. But it's also, like I said, it's just to know that, nothing that's the other thing I think is too, is the pride is also for the staff, because nothing a school does happens without the staff. Like it's not any one person. And so if somebody recognizes the work that I'm doing, that means they're also recognizing the work that the rest of the staff does. And we couldn't do it together. I mean, we couldn't do it without each other. And so that's also, it feels good just to have the work of the whole school noticed.
Yeah. Well, data shows that Latino educators are important, and you also lived this through your life growing up in Texas. What impact do you see having yourself on your students, and why are Latino teachers important?
Oh, I think they're important for a number of reasons. One, and having been in different types of situations where, sorry, I messed up my screen for a second. There we go. I think that the representation is important, not just for the children and the students in front of you, but for their families as well, but also the rest of the staff in the building, especially if the rest of the staff is from other groups. So having been in a couple different situations where I was one of several Latino educators, and then kind of being the only one, and then, being the only one, and then being now where I'm at now, like it's everybody. Like I have the privilege and the beauty and the honor of working someplace where most of us are Latino. I've kind of seen how that representation can also, like I said, affect the staff and the rest of the school, and your role, not just with the children and their families, but with the staff. And I think that's a really big, important part of it too, is we're not a monolith. I can't speak for every Latino organization educator out there. But I can also speak up. I can share some information. What I say won't apply to every single, Latino student in the building, or every Latino educator, but it is something. And I think that's important, because I remember being I just even remember when I was in Chelsea, and like I said, I had children from all over the world. And I remember getting a call in my classroom one time, and they were like, okay, we have a French speaking family. Can you come and help? I was like, no, I don't speak French. I was like, I know you think I do because of my classroom. And I know you think you do, I do, because I also speak Spanish. And like, I have these children in my classroom, but that doesn't mean I speak every language.
Mhm.
But there was this idea that because I at least spoke one other language, I was there to represent all of the non-English speaking children. And I knew all of their cultures. But I also remember this moment, one of our children who was from Liberia, was from Africa, and the girls had left. They were twins, and they had left my classroom, and the classroom next door to me was the same. And so they had moved on. I remember getting a call from this one day, and they were like, Lucy's dad is looking for you. And I was like, why? I mean, I don't even have his daughter in my classroom anymore. And they were like, I don't know, but he says it's important. You need to come downstairs. I was like, okay. So I go downstairs, and here's again this man who's not Latino, not from a Spanish speaking country. And he was having to make an important decision about his son, his middle school son, who I'd never met. but he wanted my opinion. He had come to connect with me enough, and he saw me as an advocate. He saw me as an ally, even with his own experience, within the United States, within this new language, within this culture. And I had been able to connect with him in that way, that he came to me asking for advice about what to do with his middle school son. And so I think, again, we have that opportunity to not just represent just the Latino students and the Latino families, but other families as well, and to help the rest of the staff and the rest of the families see what that looks like. And then also, when I think about what it means for our children and our students, one of my closest friends is a Black woman who has her PhD, and she finished her PhD before me. And so when I was working on my doctorate in education, she was often my cheerleader, and she would often remind me, like, there's this teeny tiny percentage of Latinas who go on to get doctorates, and you're part of that. You need to keep going. Like, I know this is hard, and I know you just had a baby, you just started a new job, but this is why you got to keep going. And so when I moved to the job that I'm at now, I remember asking her, even though I'd gone by Dr. Vega for several years before that, when I switched to the job I'm at now, I remember asking her, because I have little ones, I have 2.5 to 5-year-olds where I'm at now. And I asked her, I said, should I have them call me Dr. Vega? Like, that just seems like a lot for these little kids. And without hesitation, she said, yes. She says, because what are they are 2.5 years old, they are 3 years old, and you get to give them that exposure from their very first school experience, from their very first entry into the educational system. You get to tell these children, you get to show these children that there's nothing else other than, yes, there can be a Latina doctor. And she says, so yes, you have to have them call you Dr. Vega. They may not fully understand that, and what kind of, because of course they also think that I can give shots and things like that. She says, they may not fully understand what kind of a doctor you were until much later in their lives. But the fact that they're 3 years old and they have a Dr. Vega from the get-go, from the very beginning, that they're exposed to that possibility, yes, you have to be a part of that. So I've never questioned it since then. And so since then, I'm very passionate, very adamant, as humble as that does not sound, about making sure that I get to be Dr. Vega wherever I'm at, because I don't know who's there. I don't know who's in the space. Because I know for me growing up, all of the doctors, in terms of academic degrees, they were mostly college and university professors. Like, you didn't have them in your high schools. You didn't have them in your elementary schools. You didn't have them in your early childhood education centers like we do now, thankfully. So all that to say, I take it very seriously. I try to be a good role model. I try to set a good example. I try to make sure that people know about those opportunities, those possibilities, that the children see the possibilities, that the families see the possibilities, and that other staff. Because I know that's the other thing. Like I've said, when I've been the only Latina administrator in meetings and rooms, I remember there were times where the other doctors in the room would be, welcome Dr. So-and-so, welcome Dr. So-and-so, welcome Dr. So-and-so. And they would be like, welcome Principal Vega. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. How come I don't get to have the title? So again, that was an opportunity for me to say, no, like if I've earned this, I want you to use it. Like, and I need to be able to set that example for you as well, in a sense, as for the children and the families, that we're here, that we're doing our part.
I didn't realize that you were a doctor. I know, yeah, I know you for a couple of years, but yeah, I never realized. But what you are saying is really, yes, you're right. I never encountered a Latino doctor until I was 18, 20, yeah. But if you expose them at an early age, yeah, it is possible they can also be doctors. Like, yeah, you're right, yeah. Also, what resonated with me is representation is important also for families. They feel connected, they trust you, not only for students, but also the families, the staff, representation. Yeah, it's important everywhere. Well, we're nearing the end. I just want to know what keeps you going. You've done a lot. You have an incredible journey. What is that? What is it that keeps you going?
The generations, all of the generations. So I write some articles for a magazine on civic engagement. And I think the story I'm going to tell kind of helped me realize, oh yeah, it is all of these things across the generations that help me keep going. The last one I wrote was on voting. And I was sitting with my parents, asking them about their experiences with voting, my mom having been born in the United States and my father having been born in Mexico. And as my mom was talking, she was telling me how when her parents would vote, my grandpa was the only one who would vote. because it had a poll tax and they could only afford the poll tax for one person. And I'm thinking to myself, this is in my mom's lifetime. Like, we think so often that these things that happen to hold different communities down happened in the past, far, far, far away, right? And we don't realize how recent many of them were. And so the poll tax in Texas didn't get repealed until my mom was 14 years old. And it's only 4 years before she could vote. And that really stuck with me, that these things are more recent than we realize. And so I think I find a lot of inspiration and motivation in the stories of my grandparents. I find inspiration and motivation in the stories of my parents. I find inspiration and motivation in like I said, my friend who has her PhD, and every now and then will just send me a text that says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." I'm like, you are. And so I find inspiration in the things that my generation does and what we're able to achieve, things like LEC, like that.
Mhm.
There's inspiration and motivation in the work that this organization is doing right here, right now. And then I find inspiration and motivation in the children and the students that we are working with. And again, I have little ones where I'm at, and we look sometimes. Well, one of them will be talking, and most of the children in our center are Latino, and we'll look at them, and the teachers and I will just look at each other, and we're like, can you just imagine what this child is going to grow up to be? And we can, and we're excited by it. And so that's what also keeps us going. So I would say all of the stories from all of the generations, and where we're going next is what keeps me moving.
Okay, yes, that promise of what was the promise of what was before and then how far we gotten and the promise for us for the future generations and what is that going to look like. You're lucky you get to see the future in your classroom, what the future class, yes, what they're going to look like.
It's looking good. We
Yeah.
are going to be in really good hands.
Well, thank you. Well,
Thank
this is it.
you.
Thank you for letting us spotlight your journey and your story. And yeah, stay tuned. Follow us on social media because soon we'll be announcing who the winner are. But yeah, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your